My brother drained my savings and ran off with his girlfriend. I was devastated until my 12-year-old daughter said, "Dad, I took care of it." 2 days later, my brother showed up at my door crying. I, 42M, never thought my brother would be the one to destroy me. Growing up, we were inseparable. He was the younger one, always following me around, always looking up to me. Our parents died in a car accident when I was 25 and he was 21, and I became his guardian, his protector, his everything. I worked 2 jobs to put him through college while managing my own career. I thought we had an unbreakable bond. I was wrong. 3 weeks ago, I woke up to find my bank account empty. Not just low, empty. The savings account I'd spent 15 years building, the emergency fund I'd carefully maintained, the college fund I'd started for my daughter, all of it gone. $240,000 vanished overnight. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the screen, refreshing the page over and over like it might change the numbers. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone when I called the bank. They told me the transfers were legitimate, authorized through the secondary account holder access I'd given my brother years ago when he was going through his divorce and needed help managing his finances. I'd forgotten I'd even set that up. He'd assured me back then that he'd never touch my accounts, that it was just a safety net in case something happened to him. The fraud department said there was nothing they could do. The transfers were technically legal. My brother had the access. He'd used it. They suggested I file a police report, but we all knew what that meant. Pressing charges against my own brother, the only family I had left besides my daughter. I called him immediately. The number was disconnected. I drove to his apartment. The landlord told me he'd moved out 2 weeks prior, broke the lease, left no forwarding address. His girlfriend's place was empty too. His job said he'd quit without notice. It was like he'd planned this, meticulously erased himself from existence while draining everything I'd worked for. My daughter found me that night sitting in the dark living room, just staring at nothing. She was 12, small for her age, with her mother's eyes and my stubborn jaw. Her mother had passed away from cancer 4 years earlier, and since then, it had been just the two of us. She was mature beyond her years, had to be, but she was still a kid. I didn't want her to see me like this. She asked what was wrong. I tried to smile, tried to say everything was fine, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just broke down. I told her everything. I told her about the money, about her uncle, about how I didn't know how we were going to pay the mortgage next month, or how I was going to afford her school trip she'd been looking forward to for months. I told her I felt like a failure, like I'd let her down, let her mother's memory down. She listened quietly, sitting next to me on the couch, her small hand in mine. When I finished, she didn't cry. She didn't even look particularly upset. She just looked thoughtful, the way she did when she was working through a difficult math problem. She told me not to worry. She told me she'd take care of it. I didn't understand what she meant. She was 12. What could she possibly do? I assumed she was just trying to comfort me, trying to be strong the way she'd learned to be after her mother died. I hugged her and told her it wasn't her responsibility, that I'd figure something out. She just smiled at me, a strange little smile I didn't quite understand, and went to her room. The next 2 days were a blur of panic and desperate planning. I called lawyers who all told me the same thing. Technically, my brother hadn't committed a crime. Civil suit was possible, but expensive and time-consuming. And even if I won, collecting would be nearly impossible if he'd already spent the money. I looked into second mortgages, personal loans, anything to keep us afloat. The numbers were suffocating. My daughter seemed oddly calm through all of it. She went to school, did her homework, helped with dinner. She spent a lot of time on her laptop, but she was always doing that. She was into coding, had taught herself Python, and was learning JavaScript. I figured she was distracting herself. On the 3rd day, my brother showed up. I was in the kitchen making lunch when I heard the frantic knocking. I opened the door and barely recognized him. His eyes were red and swollen, his face pale and drawn. He'd lost weight, looked like he hadn't slept in days. He was crying before he even stepped inside, great heaving sobs that shook his whole body. He begged me to make it stop. He said he was sorry, that he'd made a terrible mistake, that he'd give everything back. He said his girlfriend had left him, that his life was falling apart, that he needed my help. I stood there in the doorway, frozen. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face. Part of me wanted to hit him. Part of me just wanted to understand why. I asked him what he was talking about, what he wanted me to stop. I hadn't done anything. I'd barely functioned for 3 days. He came inside, practically collapsed on my couch, and it all came spilling out. He told me that 2 days ago, things had started going wrong. First, his girlfriend's parents called her, hysterical, because someone had hacked their investment accounts and transferred everything to a cryptocurrency wallet. Then the cryptocurrency immediately got converted and moved through a series of untraceable transactions. Her parents lost their retirement savings. She blamed him, accused him of being involved, left him immediately. Then his new credit cards, the ones he'd opened with my money, started getting declined. When he checked, the accounts were maxed out from purchases he didn't make, thousands of dollars in donations to charities in his name. His credit score had tanked overnight from a dozen new accounts opened fraudulently. His new apartment lease fell through when the landlord received an anonymous tip about his previous eviction record, which didn't exist until someone created a fake one and uploaded it to tenant screening databases. His car was towed from outside a restaurant because someone had reported it stolen with his license plate. It took him 6 hours at the police station to sort that out. His social media accounts were hacked. Someone posted confessions about stealing from family members, detailed stories about scamming his own brother. His friends saw them. His ex-wife saw them. His former colleagues saw them. Everyone saw them before he could take them down. His bank accounts were frozen because someone reported suspicious activity that matched patterns of money laundering. The IRS received an anonymous tip about unreported income. His phone number was listed on Craigslist ads for free furniture, generating hundreds of calls and texts at all hours. Every single thing that could go wrong in someone's life electronically was happening to him simultaneously. And that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part, he said, was the emails. Someone had gotten into his email and found everything. Every conversation with his girlfriend about taking my money. Every plan they'd made to disappear. Every cold, calculated message about how I'd never find them, how I was too trusting, how easy it had been. And someone had forwarded all of it. To me. To his ex-wife's lawyer. To his former employer. To everyone in his contact list. He was crying harder now, asking me how I'd done it, begging me to stop, promising he'd return every penny. He said his girlfriend's family was threatening to sue him, that his ex-wife was filing for full custody of his kids, that he couldn't take anymore. I told him honestly that I hadn't done any of it. I'd been too devastated to even function, let alone orchestrate some elaborate revenge scheme. I didn't have those kinds of skills anyway. He didn't believe me. He kept insisting I had to be behind it, that no one else knew what he'd done, that it was too targeted to be coincidence. That's when my daughter walked into the room. She was holding her laptop, looking small and calm and completely unfazed by her uncle's breakdown on our couch. She looked at him with an expression I'd never seen on her face before, cold, analytical, almost clinical. She told him she'd done it. The room went silent. My brother stared at her. I stared at her. She explained it matter-of-factly, like she was presenting a school project. She said she'd known her uncle had access to my accounts because she'd seen the paperwork years ago when she was helping me organize my office files. After I told her what happened, she'd started digging. She'd gotten into his email first. His password was pathetically simple, just his birthday and his girlfriend's name. Once she had his email, she had everything. Password reset links, account information, his entire digital life. She'd found the messages between him and his girlfriend, all the planning, all the evidence. She'd forwarded it to me and others because she thought I deserved to know the truth, that everyone deserved to know who he really was. Then she'd started on consequences. She'd learned about social engineering and security vulnerabilities from YouTube tutorials and hacker forums. She'd used his information to access his girlfriend's family accounts. They used the same passwords for everything, she said with something like disdain. She'd made it look like he was involved to drive a wedge between them. The credit card fraud was simple, she explained. She'd opened accounts in his name, made donations to charities that helped families dealing with cancer, in my late wife's name, then reported the cards as stolen so they'd be flagged. The fake eviction record was easy to create and upload to databases that didn't verify information well. The IRS tip was just a form online. She'd done all of it over 2 days, methodically destroying his new life piece by piece while sitting at her desk doing her homework. My brother was staring at her in absolute horror. So was I, if I'm being honest. She told him calmly that she'd stop if he returned all the money immediately. Every single dollar. She had screenshots of everything, backups of all his messages, evidence of his plans. She could make his life infinitely worse if she wanted to. She could send everything to the police, to lawyers, to anyone. Or he could transfer the money back right now and she'd undo what she could and delete everything. Her voice was steady, almost gentle, but there was steel underneath it. She sounded nothing like a 12-year-old girl. She sounded terrifying. My brother agreed immediately. He was nodding frantically, pulling out his phone with shaking hands, asking for my account information. He made the transfers right there on our couch, all of it, while my daughter watched over his shoulder to verify. $240,000, returned in 3 transactions. I watched the numbers appear on my phone, still barely processing what was happening. When it was done, my daughter told him to leave and never contact us again. If he did, if he ever tried to cause problems for us, she'd release everything she had. She told him she had it set up to automatically send to law enforcement and media outlets if anything happened to her or to me. She told him she'd coded it herself, that it was foolproof. I had no idea if that was true or just a bluff. From the look on my brother's face, he didn't want to find out. He left without another word. I watched him get into his car, the one that had been towed and returned, and drive away. I haven't heard from him since. After he left, I sat my daughter down. I needed to understand. I asked her where she'd learned to do all this, how she'd known what to do. She told me she'd been teaching herself cybersecurity for over a year, that it started as curiosity about how systems worked and evolved into something more. She'd been watching tutorials, reading forums, practicing on educational hacking sites that taught security through ethical hacking exercises. She'd never done anything malicious before, she assured me. This was the first time she'd used her skills for real. I asked her if she understood what she'd done, the legal implications, the ethical issues. She was 12 years old, and she'd essentially launched a targeted cyber attack against multiple people. She told me she understood completely. She said she'd thought about it carefully before doing anything. She knew it was wrong by normal standards, but she also knew what he'd done to us was wrong. She knew I was too good, too moral to fight back the way he'd fought. So she decided she'd fight for me instead. She told me she'd been careful, that she'd used VPNs and proxy servers, that nothing could be traced back to her. She'd covered her tracks completely. No one would ever be able to prove she'd done anything. I didn't know what to say. I was horrified and proud and terrified all at once. My 12-year-old daughter had just executed a sophisticated revenge campaign against an adult man and his girlfriend's entire family. She'd done it methodically, effectively, and apparently without remorse. I told her we needed to talk about this, about ethics and consequences and appropriate responses to wrongdoing. I told her that what she'd done, while effective, wasn't right, that there were proper channels, legal ways to handle things. She listened patiently, then pointed out that the legal ways hadn't worked, that everyone I'd talked to said there was nothing I could do, that he'd get away with it completely if she hadn't intervened, that sometimes the system fails people and someone has to step up. I couldn't argue with her logic, even though I knew I should. She was right. He would have gotten away with it. I would have lost everything. We would have lost our home, her education fund, our security. And he'd done it deliberately, coldly, knowing exactly what he was taking from his own family. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since my brother showed up crying at my door. The money is back in my accounts, every penny verified and cleared. I've moved it to new accounts that only I have access to, changed all my passwords, set up 2-factor authentication on everything. My daughter helped me with the security settings, explaining each step with a patience that reminded me she really is still just a kid, even after everything. My brother hasn't contacted us. I checked with his ex-wife through a mutual friend. He's apparently staying with a cousin 2 states away, working some warehouse job, completely withdrawn from everyone. His girlfriend is gone. Her family is still dealing with their financial recovery, and from what I understand, they've hired lawyers. Whether they'll pursue anything against him remains to be seen. I haven't heard anything from law enforcement, and neither has he, apparently. My daughter has gone back to her normal routine, school, homework, coding projects. She recently joined her school's robotics team and seems genuinely excited about it. We've had several long conversations about what happened, about ethics, about the difference between justice and revenge, about how sometimes achieving the right outcome through wrong means doesn't make the means right. She listens thoughtfully to everything I say. She nods in the right places. She tells me she understands. but I can see in her eyes that same calculating look she had when she was explaining what she'd done to my brother. She's marked him as a threat that was neutralized. She's satisfied with the outcome. The moral complexity I'm trying to teach her doesn't seem to resonate the same way. It worries me. It also, I'm ashamed to admit, makes me feel safer than I've felt in years. I've thought about getting her into therapy, someone who specializes in gifted children or moral development. But what would I say? That my daughter used her coding skills to commit cybercrime on my behalf. That she orchestrated a multi-pronged attack that would be impressive even for adult hackers? I can't risk that information getting out, for her sake. Instead, I'm trying to channel her abilities in positive directions. I've signed her up for ethical hacking courses, legitimate ones through recognized platforms. I've talked to her about cybersecurity as a career, about using her skills to protect people rather than hurt them. She seems interested, engaged even. But I also know what she's capable of now. I know that if someone threatens our family again, if someone tries to hurt us, she won't hesitate. She'll calculate the most effective response and execute it without mercy. My 12-year-old daughter is the most dangerous person I know, and she's motivated by love and protection of family. I don't know if that makes me the luckiest father alive or if I should be terrified. Maybe both. What I do know is that I'll never take family for granted again. I'll never assume blood means loyalty. And I'll never, ever underestimate my daughter. She saved us. In doing so, she showed me that sometimes the people we think we know best are strangers, and sometimes the people we think we're protecting are actually the ones protecting us. I just hope I can guide her to use that power wisely.